Oh, no mercy.
Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productions. Joining me today, I've got another great guest for you. This man is a former England international fighter, nightclub bouncer, karate and fitness instructor, a video game character. For those of you who remember the game Kasumi Ninja, this man played the part of Angus McGregor. So welcome on the show, Ian McCranor. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, mate.
So, Ian, there's quite a lot to go through here, mate. It's some great stuff. Before we get into that, can I just roll you back to the beginning, a little bit of sort of your childhood, where you grew up and how you started out?
Okay, I grew up born in Coventry, in the West Midlands. I've recently, you got it. I've recently written a book that tells you all about that. I had a very difficult time at school. I wasn't a bad student, but I wasn't a very bright student, let's put it that way. So I kind of struggled at school. I kind of blagged my way through it. And a lot of the book that I've written kind of talks about that. And it talks about how I had to, the only thing I wanted to do was to find confidence. The one thing I didn't have that I didn't realize was that I wasn't a confident person at all. I was scared of everything. And growing up in Coventry and Willenhall, which was a very working class environment, I obviously bumped into regularly the bullies, the people involved in a lot of crime. I went to school, rubbed shoulders with a lot of people who then went on to spend a lot of their adult life in and out of jail. So I was mixing with some shady characters, but nice. A lot of them were nice people, but they started out with a bad, a bad environment that, how could they do any better? How could they achieve anything else? And I found myself running scared the entire time. And I thought I had to learn to fight to be able to be somebody, to protect myself. I thought learning to fight would give me confidence. But I did it all wrong, mate. I did it all totally wrong. It didn't matter how good a fighter I became. It didn't matter at all. I could be a phenomenal fighter. It didn't matter, because fighting isn't really what happens when you get into a scrape on the street. It's very, very rarely a fight. What I learned was that I had to become very good at being very, very violent for very short periods of time. So when I took up karate and got very good at competition karate, I believed that that's what I needed to do. I thought that made me somebody. It made me confident, until a very bad street confrontation blew it all away, changed everything. After years and years of training, I realized I had literally nothing in my arsenal, because it's not a physical game. Growing up in Coventry, growing up in Willenhall, although it was I think a violent place, it was the right place for me. It was what I needed. It taught me how to behave. And what I did, Lee, was I created different personalities to achieve different objectives. So I don't know if that's what you do. I'm guessing it's what you do. Are you the same person at work that you are today? Are you the same person in the house that you are in a nightclub? We all kind of got different personalities, and that's kind of what the book does. It talks about that.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Ian. Like your certain personalities have to come out in certain times, don't they?
Right.
Like, if you're going to work and you're having a nice day or out with your family, you're not going to see that angry, nasty side of you, are you? So it's
right.
Yeah, it's correct what you said there. It's like different personalities for different situations.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to your training hall tonight, or you might have been already to go and train, you're not the same person training that you are at home. You're not the same person when you go out for a drink at night that you are in a training hall. We don't realize it, but we switch on different personalities. And what I was able to do was create a particular personality that I 100% believed in, and I became that person. When I became a bouncer, I am so far removed from being an aggressive, violent person, but I found somebody inside me who could do it for me. I handed that job over to somebody else. So I went to work on the door as me. But then when situations started to arise, I handed how to deal with that to somebody else. And I worked with a lot of bouncers who were that violent person all the time. That's who their life, that's what their life was all the time. But I just turned it on and turned it off.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'll just touch on something from personal there for myself. I trained a fighter, and on the pads he was technically good, he had the power. But in his first fight, he just couldn't switch on the sort of attack mode. And in the second fight, I sat down with him and said to him, think of some bad things, think of something that upset you, think of some stuff that's, trauma in your life, and feel aggressive, make that come out in your fight. And it did. He done it. He come out in the fight and straight out, bang, big. He had the fire in his belly.
So what you're saying with him, it was a mental thing, not a physical thing.
Correct.
And
yeah.
The way I described that, and every kind of interview, that I've had, I describe it in exactly the same way, and it really does sink home when you hear this. How old are you?
So I'm 47 at the minute.
47. So for 46 years, you've been walking, taking single steps. If you started walking when you were 1.
Yeah.
So in 46 years, how many single steps do you think you've taken? Billions and billions. So by definition, you should be a single step expert. If I said stand up now and take one single step, you go, yeah, easy, and just do it without any thought whatsoever, because you're a single step expert. Now, if I said to you, now stand on a high diving board or on the edge of a cliff where people do their high diving, and they seem quite safe doing it, they do it all the time, it's their sport, it's their hobby, but I get you to stand on the edge and I say, take that one single step that you've done billions of times. You can't do it. You look down and go, I can't do it. It's not physical. And the reason I use that analogy is because, like you said, with the guy you're training with, he could spend 46 years doing a right cross on a pad in a safe environment, and he's got the powerfulest punch. He's accurate, he's fast, he's got a knockout punch that undoubtedly would floor anybody. He can do it on a pad. But once you take him out of that environment and you say, take that one single step, do that one single punch when the person in front of you is a monster. This is somebody who's going to hurt you. Even if you knock him out, even if you win, you know that it's not over. These people come back. So it's not the physical act of throwing a punch. Learning to throw a punch is very, very easy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's pulling the trigger at the right time. That's a mental thing. And that's kind of what I had to learn. I realized all the training I was doing, it didn't matter how good a fighter I became. I could be a phenomenal fighter. If I couldn't be violent, it's pointless. It's great for the club for sparring. It's great for competing. But in reality, all the most dangerous people I know are not necessarily good fighters or technically proficient. They are animals. They're just ruthless and they're just violent, and they're violent for short periods of time. They will cross the line that you and I probably would never cross. and that makes them very dangerous.
What age did you very first start to train or find sort of martial arts?
I started training initially in Aikido. Some friends of mine at school had found an Aikido club, and I saw them messing around in the street one day, and it looked really cool. So I went and did some Aikido. And then while we're doing that, Kung Fu came on the TV.
Yeah, what the
David
series with David Carradine, yeah.
David Carradine in the 70s. And that was really fascinating to somebody who'd never seen that kind of fighting before, even though look at it now, it's very lame. But at the time, it was fascinating. My friends then, I guess we were 14, 15, we sneaked into a soft porn movie in the cinema. We sneaked in. And before it started, there was a trailer for Fist of Fury, Bruce Lee. And I just sat there wide-eyed and like, wow. You know, so I looked around for a Kung Fu club, but there were no Kung Fu clubs around locally in the 70s. So I found a karate club. So that's when my karate started then, thanks to, you know, the Bruce Lee craze.
Yeah. What style of karate was that you first started with, Ian?
Wadaroo. Yeah,
Wadaroo.
pretty much stuck with, Wado.
Did you stick with that system for your journey, or?
I kind of did, because it was a Pete Spanton, a club that was a member of Higashi with Pete Spanton. And we go down maybe 2-3 times a year to Forest Gate and train. And those were the days that you didn't really hear much, at least for the first 6-8 months of my training. You didn't really hear about competition. It was all randori. I don't even know these days if clubs do randori, or even if they know what it is. You know, just like free fighting, sparring.
Yeah.
And there wasn't. The only rules were you're trying to not hurt each other. But of course, everyone was getting hurt, but you're trying to control yourself. But there was no referees. There was no rules of engagement. It was just, you know, the kicking and the punching and the combinations. It was non-stop, and a completely different game to competition. And then when competition came along, I kind of fell in love with that. So that's when I really started to realize I needed to be an athlete, not just somebody who can kick and punch. I had to train like an athlete for that.
What sort of age was you when you first competed, Ian?
When I first competed, I was probably maybe 16, and that was Swindon, first competition. I don't know if you remember the era then. Some of the top teams were like Bristol Higashi. It was do you remember a guy called Roberto Mastrangeli from Swede? They called him from Wales. The Welsh team were phenomenal. Bristol team were phenomenal, and I went to watch the competition as a complete beginner. Maybe a green belt, maybe, and I sat and watched those guys fight, and I just absolutely, totally fell in love with competition. It was probably a year after that I went to watch a competition at Crystal Palace, and that's when Ishinru came out. And Tiki came out, he was fighting, Pete Dennis was fighting, Will Werner, Tyrone White. Those guys came out, and I just sat there and could not believe what I was watching. You know, those were the Wuko days. Those were the days, like they call the golden years of karate. It was phenomenal. It's changed a lot since then.
So just ask you there, Ian, sorry. When you very first started martial arts, how did you find the discipline, sort of from coming from like the sort of rough area of Coventry? What was the discipline like, sort of walking into a dojo for the first time?
I think it was the discipline that I kind of warmed to. It's very, very strict, really strict. You know, we're talking Pete Spanton days. You had to, you couldn't move, you couldn't scratch your ass, you couldn't do anything in a club. You stood in line, and if you moved, you know, you got in trouble. And that, the discipline part of it, correct technique, correct stance, correct communication with each other, was huge for me.
Do you find that helps you in your life, sort of in general life, not just in karate?
Oh, without a doubt. I was talking to somebody earlier about this very thing, about how clubs, and obviously I haven't seen a lot of clubs these days, so I'm kind of surmising from things I've seen on franchise clubs. When you see the videos come up, they talk about teaching kids to be disciplined. All they do is play games. That's all they do. The kids karate, it should be called karate themed club, not karate. And are they getting disciplined? Not in the same way as we did. They're kind of they're doing what you would expect in our day a scout group to do.
Yeah.
Like a scout club with a martial art theme, and they play games, they're laughing and joking. Nobody fails a grading. Every single person, every time a grading, a belt test comes up, they walk right through it, they pass it. And there's no such thing as winning all the time. There's no such thing as achieving all the time. 90% of your life you're not going to achieve. And a child needs to, I think, learn how it works, how they have to put the work in. They can't just get their belts because they show up. And that happens far, far too many times these days.
Yeah, I think the whole world's just gone a bit too soft, isn't it, nowadays? It's a bit...
There's a thing called inclusion trophies. Is they get a trophy for a participation trophy. They get a trophy for participating. There's a first, second, probably joint third. Now, that's life. You're not going to win everything. I mean, as a competitor, I realized, I guess, really early on that if I was only happy when I won, I was happy 5% of the time. You got to enjoy the process. You've got to go, and that was my problem to a degree. I call it a problem, but it's my problem is that when I made it to on the England squad and to compete internationally, for me at least, the fun went out of it for me. I'm getting picked, so now I've got to win. You're not getting picked to participate. You're being picked because you're good enough to win. And the enjoyment went for me. And I realized that all I really wanted to do was to get on the vehicle. I didn't want the vehicle to take me to European Championships or World Championships. I was just happy being on the vehicle. And until I got on the vehicle, I didn't realize that. And when I did realize it, it was, okay, I'll do this for a while and then I'm going to walk away from it. And I did. I walked away from it. So I never had any aspirations to be anything more than I wanted to wear an England badge. That was it. And once I'd done that, it was done for me. So I quit pretty early on, actually.
Ian, can you just walk us through your sort of karate career, sort of how you went through the grading systems, and then obviously can we touch a little bit on how you got selected for the England team?
I was part of a group called Terra Karate, which was out of Birmingham, Toru Kamazawa. And I was competing regularly. And I remember watching Pete Dennis. You know Pete Dennis?
Yeah.
I watched Pete Dennis at Crystal Palace. And I saw an England badge. And I went, I want one of those. I'm going to get one of those. So I did the work. I went regularly down to courses. Went on Ticky's course a number of times, these summer course, and just did the training, mixed with the right people, trained with the right people, and then just bit by bit got myself into being noticed. And my very first international fight wasn't with the full England side. It was with the EKF. We went away with You recall Eddie Daniels?
Yep.
He was coaching at the time. And the first one was in the States, in Chicago. Competed there for 2 weeks, came back. About 2 weeks later, I let her come through the door saying they're selected to fight against Japan at Crystal Palace. So went to Crystal Palace, had that fight. And then I think I had a handful more fights after that. There's a Norway, one against Australia, which is in Dagenham. And I think they came back from the World Championships. We're fighting them before they went home. I had a handful of international fights. And then the first Commonwealth Karate Federation Championships were held in Guernsey. And I picked up a silver at that. And that was kind of my last hurrah, really. It was like, yeah, I'm done now. I'm finished now.
Yeah. I think I was at that Australia versus England fight in, was it Newham Leisure Centre?
I don't know. It was in Dagenham, but it was the.
Yeah.
So what year? It'd have been late 80s, maybe?
Yeah. I think it was at the Newham Leisure Centre, and they had the England A and the B team fought against the Australians.
I think you're right. Yeah, Australian had been to the World Championships and they're on the way home, weren't they?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. I was there watching that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Many years ago. Can you just run us a little bit through how long it took you to get to your grades and what grade you got up to?
I am right now. I'm 6th Dan.
Yeah.
It took me 3 years to my black belt. And to be honest, after I got my first Dan, I was kind of forced into taking grades. I really wasn't interested in traditional karate and taking grades. But once you got your first Dan, you're supposed to wait 2 years to second Dan, 3 years to third Dan, and so on. And I always just pushed into it. Kata wasn't my thing, but it was discipline. I had to do it, so I did it. But kata, I never will understand it. I think it's great to watch. I think the people who are good at it look phenomenal. But I don't really get it. And that might sound strange. Nice to watch, but I don't understand it. But I went through all. I learnt the katas. I went through the gradings. But every Dan grade that I took, I kind of took under duress a little bit. I went through the motions of it.
And so what we'll do, if we can just, can you take us into like events now? So obviously you've done your karate training and then you've gone into sort of nightclub door work. So how has your martial arts helped you in them sort of situations? Or when did that also come into play when you started working the door?
The nightclub door work, I talk about in the book quite a lot, actually. It came about, now bear in mind that I'd started karate because of what I thought was my need to learn to fight. The people who were respected or thought were respected as a child were people who could have a fight. So I thought I'd learn to fight. And this new thing on the scene was karate. So I thought, I'll take up karate. Became really good sparring. And because you're not fighting on the street, it's all theory. If you're thinking that you can equate what you're doing in a club in a street fight, because you're not doing it. And the same thing happens today. A lot of people in the karate club think that because they can have a fight in their karate club, it will translate to the street and they're going to have a massive shock. So a guy came to the club one night, really good amateur boxer, and he was a really good taekwondo exponent, good 10 years older than me, came to the club and just for a sparring session to do the sparring. I sparred with him and we had a right ding dong at the end of it. He went, "Hey man, have you ever thought about working the door?" And my heart sank because mentally I was still running away from the thing I wanted to gain, the confidence, the ability to have a fight. I was hiding behind my own bullshit. Really, I can have a fight because I can spar. I can have a fight because I can beat these people up in the club if I wanted to. Not blowing my own trumpet, but I was pretty much dominating most of the club at the time. And this guy came, had a great fight with him, and he said, "You ever thought about working the door?" And my heart just sank and thought, "Well, no, not really." But I thought, "No, I need to do this. How hard can it be?" So he was a doorman in a club just outside of Coventry. So I go to the club the first night I worked, and he said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. We're good here. We're a good team." And it kicked off big time. People were getting glassed, and people were getting hit with chairs, and I just shit myself. I didn't know what I was doing. There's nothing in a karate club. There's nothing in a trained environment that can prepare you for the kind of shit that I saw. I just bottled it big time. I watched him knock somebody out. I watched people dragged around, their head stamped on. When that all blew over, he left me standing on the front door when he went to do something. And one of the guys that were fighting, his shirt had been ripped off. He came in. He tried to get back in. He got blood all over him. Tried to get back in. I stopped him and he just said, "Get your fucking hands off me." And I just bottled it and let him in. And I called the guy and said, "Oh, he sneaked past me." I started lying. I was lying to myself. Of course, this guy chinned him. I thought they killed him. The other guys jumped on him. They gave him a right good idea. I went home that night thinking the police are going to come round. The first night on the door, I've just watched somebody get killed. This is horrendous. So I quit. The very first night, I quit. A short while, maybe 6 months after that, I realised, I put it in the book there, I realised that I didn't see any fighting. I realised that it wasn't about fighting. I realised it was about tricks and traps. You trick somebody into position, you trap them, and then you nail them. And that's what happens on a nightclub door. You don't fight with people. And I realised that I had to get good at tricking people, trapping them, and then being first. Why am I going to do a job on a nightclub door where I'm going to stand and fight with people and test myself against people who I don't know? What I've got to do is make sure that I'm ahead of the game. I read the situation. I get away from the situation if I can. If I can't, I finish it. So the door work changed my way of training. And what I did was I separated my competitive training, karate training, and street fighting. I call it street fighting, door work. So the karate and the competitive fighting, the sparring, suddenly had nothing whatsoever to do with a fight on the nightclub door or altercation on the nightclub door. Because obviously, if you do get into a square go one-on-one, if you can't box, if you've got no boxing ability, you're going to struggle. I don't care if you're great at taekwondo. I don't care if you're good at judo, jiu-jitsu. If you can't have a stand-up boxing session with somebody, you're going to struggle. So I started getting involved more in boxing for that particular aspect of it, and totally separated what I was doing. My karate, my training, my competing was over here, and it had nothing to do whatsoever with what was over here. I separated them, and I really fell back in love with karate again, because I wasn't looking at karate as what's going to help me. I just enjoyed it as a competitive sport as an athlete, if that makes sense.
I had the same sort of little bit similar myself. So when I was training karate, we'd done so much competition work, constantly competition sparring. And then I started training kickboxing, my friend. Obviously, I was better than a lot of the beginners at the kickboxing.
Yeah.
And so the instructor put me into a kickboxing fight. I said, "Do you want to fight?" I was like, "Yeah, all right." I pretty much got my ass handed to me on a plate. I weren't used to being hooked. I weren't used to being uppercutted. I weren't used to full contact. And it's a real wake up call for me. That's when I sort of switched to go at full contact after that myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different, isn't it?
Yeah. I know you do a lot of interviews with the subject matter about the Essex Boys.
Yeah.
And about like the rise of the foot soldier and all the gangster stuff. Now, when you look at all of those people, yes, there are people there who can have a fight. They're boxers, they're handy, they can really stand up and have a proper row. But if you look at the majority of them, how many of them actually have fights? A lot of them, they go on a visit to be violent, to hurt people. So that's kind of what I'm alluding to when I say about separating. You're talking about kickboxing in the ring and full contact. Even in a street fight or even in a altercation where those type of people are involved, the reason you're scared of them is because they don't fight with you. They're not about fighting. They're going to visit you and they're going to hurt you in a different way. And all your fighting ability is not going to protect you against those kind of villains. They're going to turn up and they're really going to hurt you. They don't care if you can fight. You can't train to fight with them because they will cross the line that you won't cross.
Yeah. Yeah, you find yourself at the next level then, don't you? You have to escalate.
Totally different. Yeah.
You have to cross that line yourself to survive, don't you, basically?
Exactly. Yeah. But I did it. I'm sure you did it. In the nice, friendly, relaxed lounge environment, you can daydream about how you beat somebody with style, how you do this technique and that technique, and it all works. And that's what you do when you train. You believe that this is what it's going to be like, but it's nothing like that whatsoever. I've kind of turned my back on the not competitive side only. I've kind of turned my back on that kind of training because it isn't something that I really ever want to think about anymore because it is so violent. I will go and hit the punch bag. I'll do some sparring some day, boxing sparring some days. Very little involved in karate or martial arts stuff. It's bag work, lifting weights, just training to stay in some kind of reasonable shape, really. But in terms of even talking about all that, it's like a backward step for me.
Yeah.
I don't need to be taught. We talk about it because it is a subject that other people would be interested in hearing about, but it isn't something that I feel that I can celebrate that I was involved in, because I was involved in some really violent altercations and some horrible situations that I learned a lot from, but it isn't something that I'm comfortable with. It wasn't a good time.
Yeah. Ian, if it's all right with you, would we be able to dive a little bit deeper into them sort of situations, if you can talk about them? Or
when you hurt somebody, I have a massive amount of empathy, and empathy in the right measure is good, just enough, but too much it can destroy you. So when you got somebody who comes to a nightclub door, for example, and it happens, if you've worked the door, I'm correct.
Yeah,
worked the door?
I've done it for years.
Yeah. So when you work the door, somebody comes to the front door. They're normal young lads in their early 20s, a bit of bravado, a few drinks. Some of them, because of the drugs, they start to behave in a
Change,
manner.
don't
Yeah,
totally change.
but that's somebody's child.
Yeah.
Now you've got the thugs who sometimes deserve a good hiding, but a lot of these youngsters, they say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and they're playing up because they're trying to be somebody. They're trying to be accepted and be somebody, and to be somebody, they think they're going to behave this way. And when you've hit somebody and you've not as you know, knocking somebody out is not it's not clever. It's dead easy. People think it's kind of, you've got to be an expert, powerful puncher. No, you haven't. All you got to be is on target, and you hit them pretty hard, but you haven't got to be crazy powerful. And you hit them, and they're unconscious the second you hit them. They don't fall over and just lie there and look pretty. They're unconscious the second you hit them, and their legs go and they fall. They smash their teeth on the floor. Their teeth are out. Their face is bleeding. The amount of times I've seen wallets lying around, somebody's got a lottery ticket in there. They've been out that night to buy a lottery ticket to better their life. They've had a few drinks. They've stood in front of you, got a bit leery. You know they're going to hit you. You've hit them, and now you're looking at somebody's child lying on the floor. And that's just, for me anyway, that just destroyed me to the point at which, I couldn't do it anymore. I was hurting people really quite easily. And it affected me mentally a lot more than it would somebody who, I say a lot more, I'm not even sure that's true, but somebody who grew up with violence in the house, somebody who is a violent person anyway. The character that I created that could be violent would do the job, then that character would walk away and leave me with all the empathy to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I've hurt somebody, and now my alter ego hurt somebody. Now I've got to pick up the mental pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, in your book, there's a few stories of some sort of serious incidents happened. Can we go into a little bit of them? One incident of you've been shot at and stuff like that.
Oh right, that wasn't the door work one. That was I had been to Las Vegas. You know Jeff Thompson.
Yep.
Me and Jeff were big pals for years. We were at door for years, trained together. And he had an invite to Las Vegas to teach on the Chuck Norris convention. And I was living in the States, and it's only like a 3-hour flight for me. So I flew over to Las Vegas, met Jeff, and I got myself a slot on the seminar to teach competition fighting to the Chuck Norris competition team. So I had a blast doing that. But then I watched a guy, and this is in the book, I watched a guy teaching a group fitness class. And this guy was a former student of Billy Blanks. Billy Blanks was the Taibo guy, group fitness. Yeah. And he's a former student.
Billy Blanks, the actor as well, that was in the King of Kickboxers? Yeah.
Yeah. So this, I'll tell you the guy's name because I've already spoken to him about it. He's fine. His name's Garrett. Garrett was one of Billy Blank's students, and Garrett was teaching the group fitness class. And I sat watching that, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I'm out of the door work, really. Well, I am at the door work. I'm out of the karate stuff. This is a group fitness class, kind of based on Taibo because he was a Billy Blanks guy. So Garrett invited me over to California then. So I went over to California for 2 weeks to learn how he was teaching this class. And his club was just full of celebrities. There were actors in there, all kinds of people in there from, they were Hollywood elite in his class. And I spent 2 weeks with him. So I'd been back home maybe a few months, maybe. And on the television, on the news, it said a man shot on his doorstep was the ex-husband of, I got this right, it's confusing me now. Let me get this right. Garrett's ex-wife, his wife had left him. His wife was the ex-wife of Joe Pesci, the actor. And the news item was that he'd been shot 4 times on his doorstep. But it was his ex-wife that had orchestrated it. She'd hired a hitman to kill him.
Oh dear.
I know. The reason I mention it in the book is because when all the report came out about it, the guy had been scoping out the place while I was staying at Garrett's house. So I'd have been answering the door, been ordering Chinese every night, takeaway. So I've been opening the door most nights, taking food in. And what happened was the guy had knocked the door, rang the doorbell, the door had opened and he shot him on the doorstep.
Right.
And so, you know, I count it like I dodged a bullet because it could easily have been, could have been me.
Yeah, could have been you that opened the door that time. I don't suppose he stopped to check who there was. I suppose he just fired.
He opened it and just opened fire, yeah.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just, can you go us a little bit through how you became an instructor? So when your transition went from training and fighting into an instructor?
Right. I left school with 0 qualifications. And at 16, I was working in a dead-end job, pushing buttons in a factory. I shouldn't call it a dead-end job. People have got to work in factories and push buttons. But to me, it was like a nowhere, doing nothing job. And there was nothing else I could do, really. I was in a factory pushing buttons. But then I decided there's something in this teaching karate. I could do this. As I got better, I realized I could turn my hobby into a profession, which I did. I then became a full-time karate instructor. I ran a karate association for a good while. And that's kind of what I thought I would be doing. That's all I do. That's what it is. I then got a phone call asking me if I'd be interested in being a computer game character in the game we spoke about earlier, called Kasumi Ninja. And I thought it was a wind-up. I thought somebody was winding me up. Bear in mind, I was getting calls from doormen who wind you up regularly. And it was one of the lads who worked the door. He said, oh, they need somebody in Manchester to do a character in a computer game. And it sounded dead legit. But there's part of me that didn't trust the person calling. So I thought, I'll do it. I'll just go and find out. It sounds legit. So I drive to Manchester. I get to the building. There's no sign on there that I remember. It wasn't like a big studio. Get to this house. And I go through the door. And all I remember, 30 years ago, all I remember was there was a green screen and a naked woman. And I'm thinking, I have been set up. This is a porno. They've set me up. Good God. So, but what had really happened was there was no changing rooms. It's all been done in one room. And this woman didn't care. She did her bit. She was getting changed. And it was legit. The guy called me in, explained to me what it's about. And he gives me a kilt, gives me a sporran, gives me a waistcoat. Then they glue this big ginger beard on me. And then put me in front of this green screen. And he said, okay, so what have you got for us? And I just sat there and said, I don't know what do you mean, what have I got for you? Well, you're a karate guy and you're a bouncer, and this guy is supposed to be a bit of a brawler. And so we kind of thought, you better make stuff on the spot, just make it up. And so I did. So if you have to look for the game on YouTube, Kasumi Ninja. Yeah. The character lifts his kilt and a fireball comes out there. Yeah, that's what he's known for. And when I suggested that, and they said, yeah, we'll do that, I was like, oh, okay, really? Bear in mind, this was 1994. We couldn't go onto the internet then and look at things. We couldn't see how things were progressing, how the game was growing. Once you did that shoot and walked away, that was it. You never saw anything else about it. So the moves that I did in that game, there's one which is what they call the fatality move. Is I suggested I turn round, I kick the person in the head. Bear in mind, there's nobody there. You have to pretend they're there. It's just you and a green screen.
Yeah.
I said, can you make their head come off? So, oh, yeah, we can make their head come off. So, okay, how about if I turn around, we kick their head off the shoulders, the head comes up. When it comes down, I'll headbutt it, turn to the camera and go, okay, which I did. If you look for it on YouTube, you'll see all that.
Yeah.
So that was 30 years ago. About a year ago, I get contacted, somebody asking me, do you do conventions as Angus McGregor from Kasumi Ninja? And I had no clue what he's talking about. So I get talking, so I'll go social on Facebook. So I start researching retro gaming. And sure enough, there are millions and millions of retro gamers all over the world who are, we say retro gamers, people are playing old games.
Yeah.
And there is like a fan base for Angus McGregor, the character that I played. And, you know, he was the star of the show. So I start joining a few Facebook pages and telling people who I am, what I did. And I start getting messages all over the place. Do you do conventions? Can we see you at conventions? So, well, yeah, of course they can. Yeah. So I get an invite to Milwaukee, to Wisconsin. When I did that one, the Saturday just gone, I was at a convention in London. The one before that, I was in one in Wolverhampton. We've already got one booked for September in Germany. Invites, all because of retro gaming and this one character that I played 30 years ago.
Did you also do another game as well, Ian?
Not long after that, I was contacted about getting a group together to do a game called Batman and Robin for the PlayStation. The movie came out of the same name, the one with George Clooney, and my karate club. The entire cast of the Batman and Robin game were from my karate club or people that I found. So I got a boxer friend to do Batman. He did all the punching of Batman. I did all the kicking. I did all the kicking of Robin. And my whole karate club were involved in the characters for Batman and Robin. And I also did a character called The Thing from the Fantastic Four. So that was all motion capture. So, yeah, been quite an interesting life. From karate to being a bouncer to fitness coach to motion capture.
Just to follow on from that, Ian, you're also an author now. So can we go in a little bit about your book and what it's called?
I am. I've got the book right here, actually. That's it right there.
Yeah.
For Fighting with Myself. And as we spoke about earlier, the Fighting with Myself is the title. It kind of explains it all, really, how you fight with yourself, about how I was fighting to gain confidence. I got a very low self-esteem. As a teenager, kind of felt worthless. And it was creating different personalities. That personality, that alter ego that I spoke about, that I created, that helped me or did the job for me as a bouncer. You can create other personalities to do other tasks. I'll give you an example of something I did as a teenager that I didn't ask anybody how to do it. I didn't I couldn't research it. I just laid in bed one day and thought, this is how you do it. This is how I'm supposed to gain some confidence. I would walk into a supermarket, for example, as a teenager, and spend a long time looking for stuff. I wouldn't go to a stranger and just talk to them. That's how shy I was as a teenager. People who knew me back then wouldn't have realized because of the person they saw me become. So I decided one day, and I do it now out of habit. I decided that even if I knew where something was in the supermarket, even if I knew where it was, I would walk in, I would look for an assistant and say, oh, excuse me, any chance you could let me know show me where the so-and-so is? And I start a conversation, and I'll be bricking it. I'll be shitting myself because that isn't who I was. I wasn't. It sounds strange to people who have got confidence, how that it is disabling if you haven't. So I would purposely go to a store and force myself to ask somebody, even though I knew where it was, just so that I could have a conversation. And once the conversation started, then a bit of banter with them. So even to this day, I would still go into a store, feel a bit uncomfortable, which sounds strange at my age and experience, but I would still go out of my way to talk to somebody, to break the ice, become the person that I needed to be to get the task done. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But I'm sure there are thousands of millions of people out there who struggle with their confidence like that every single day.
I'll be honest with you. I've been like that most of my life, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's with strangers, people I don't know. With people I know, I'm fine. But when we're strangers, it takes me a little while to adjust and feel comfortable. But I think a lot of people like it. It's just people don't ever tell anyone, do they?
Exactly. Yeah. That is that's the premise, really, of the book. Because I know there are a lot of people out there who they feel that way, and they're spectators of life. They're spectating other people living. They're not, because they've got a lot of self-doubt. And there's a chapter in the book about how I really came out my shell. I got an invite at age 17 to go to Bournemouth with a group of lads from the factory that I was working in. I'd never been out on an all-dayer, 5-6 days in a row, drinking and partying. That isn't what I did. When I went to a pub, I would pretend I was okay, but really I was quiet in the background. I was the spectator. And I was still wearing big baggy jeans with docker pockets and a big waistband. And these lads I went with were 3, 4, 5 years older than me. And they got real smart gear on. They looked the business, and they're confident walking into pubs. And so I'd gone, and I got these clothes with me. I got dressed to go out the first night. And these lads saying, "We're fucking going out with you dressed like that. You look like a clown." They would. So they had to borrow me clothes to even go out with me. So I borrowed their clothes and went out, and watching them. Again, I then created a personality that can go into a pub. The personality that went into the pub isn't me. It was a personality that belonged in the pub. If that makes sense. And I guess I still do that a lot now. It's, a big crowd and a party atmosphere is not necessarily where I feel most comfortable, but once I ask that personality, that alter ego, who is okay in the party, to take over, I have a blast.
Yeah.
So the whole book is about but explaining how I created different personalities to deal with tasks. And as you read it, every single person that read it have gone, "Oh my God, that's me."
Yeah.
That's exactly who I am. But like you said, that's who I am, but I didn't feel comfortable telling anybody until now. You've given me permission to tell people that's how I feel. And I say to them, well, yeah, because nobody cares. You spend too much time worrying that somebody actually cares, and they don't. Their life's too busy. They've got too much going on in their own life to worry about what you're thinking or what you're feeling. So just be honest with people, tell them the truth, and you'll find the truth will set you free, as they say.
Yeah, I used to find it a lot on the doorwork as well, because obviously, like a lot of the other doormen were very sociable, chatting to everyone and girls. Well, I weren't comfortable like that, so I just keep myself to myself.
Yeah,
And everyone would get that wrong impression of me that I'm moody, miserable, mean, and everyone would always say, "Oh, you're mean. I wouldn't want to mess with you." But I'm like, it's not that I'm being mean. It's just I'm not comfortable. So I've got
exactly.
sort of a different vision from people to what I
Yeah,
really was. Yeah.
exactly. I've got a tattoo there that says change your, and it's in the book, change your perception, change your reality. Because your perception, somebody's perception of you is who they think you are, and it's totally different from who you are.
Yeah.
Completely different. Because you're quiet, they filled in the blanks and said, well, he must be arrogant then, he must be an arsehole, he must be mean.
Yeah.
And your perception, my perception, excuse me, of the person who's trying to come in can change from 1 second to the next. So I believe they're behaving this way, when reality is this is what's going on in their head. And my job as a bouncer, before I let them in, was to not have a perception of them. My job was to actually find out who they are, find out what they really are thinking through having a conversation with them and watching them, and find out what kind of behavior they really are involved in. So your perception is your reality. Your perception is your truth. If you believe it, it's absolutely true. So if you believe that you are a nobody, you're right. If you believe you're shy, you believe you're quiet, you're right. You have to change that perception of who you think you are before you can actually move on and be the person you want to be.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So, Ian, can I just ask you, have you got any words of advice for any youngsters that are watching, sort of in their path of direction of where they can go and what they should do?
It's a difficult one, that, isn't it? Because you can't put an old head on young shoulders. If I was to give any advice, if I give any advice whatsoever, I would say that the biggest attribute anybody could have, you need to learn how not to be overconfident. You need to work out how you can gain confidence. Confidence is massive, and people underestimate how powerful it is. Without it, like we said earlier, without it, you'll sit back and you'll be a spectator of life. So for a youngster, instead of chasing a fighting ability, instead of trying to be somebody for somebody, now there's a bit in the book there that I say to that explains something that when you read it, your first impression is, well, that can't be right. That's not true. That's not right. It says men rarely get attacked. Well, how can that be true? Of course they get attacked. Men get mugged, they get jumped on, they get attacked. Well, of course they do. But the word rarely is important. Men rarely get attacked. What happens is their ego gets attacked. And then their ego gets them into a fight. So you're sitting in a pub with a group of lads, somebody says something, they stare at you. And what you should do is say, hey lads, listen, we're leaving. There's some lads over there. Looks like it could be a bit of trouble, a bit of problem. We should leave. These young lads don't do that. Most men won't do that. They'll stand their ground and say, no, I'm not leaving. You've got everything to lose, nothing to gain by staying. If that's the situation, if it's going to kick off, you should just leave, just go, move. It's easy to say you can do it in the cold light of day. When you're involved in it, it's a different story. But men rarely get attacked. Their ego gets attacked, and they let their ego get them into a fight. So it takes a lot of confidence in yourself. That's what I'm talking about when I say young kids should be striving not to be able to fight, not to try and impress their friends. They should be striving to have enough confidence to be able to walk away from a situation and let their friends talk about them. Oh, he walked away from a fight. He let this guy talk to him in a way that was disrespectful. He let him do that. My answer is, yeah, but he's safe. He's back home with his parents. He's safe. What if he went over to that lad to prove something to you and he got stabbed? Or he hit somebody and killed them? He is now in jail for what? He could have walked away. It takes a lot of confidence in yourself to look at all your friends and say to your friends, I'm leaving. Just going to kick off, I'm leaving. That takes a lot of confidence to do that, but it's the most sensible thing to do. Yeah. So the advice that I would give youngsters is, don't try and be tough. Don't try and be the big man. Have enough confidence, learn to be confident enough to know when to and when not to.
Ian, where can people find you if they're interested in contacting you or getting involved in your books or for the video game? Where can people find you?
If they want to find me, they're very, very welcome. I love it. I get it all the time. Just look for me on Facebook, add me, send me a message. I spend a lot of time people adding me and sending messages, and I talk to people all the time. I'm quite happy to. If they want to buy the book, just look for that book. Typically, what most people would do on Google it, or look on Amazon. People have messaged me and I've signed one and sent it to them. They could do that. So really just type it in on Google or type it in on Amazon and that'll be there.
Lovely. Ian, we'll start to wind it up there, mate. I won't keep you for any longer, keep you for any of your time. But thank you ever so much for coming. It's really appreciated, and I love listening to the stories you tell.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, mate. Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks so much. Oh, I wore this shirt to give a big shout out to a guy called Tom at Guys, Games and Beers in Wisconsin. Because when I went over there, I didn't know anybody. I went on my own to this convention, and somebody sent me to a room where Tom, he gave beers away. He got this big computer gaming room and a corner just full of beers, and he would not let you finish your drink and not have another one. We spent the whole time drunk. So I want to do a big shout out to Tom, who looked after me in Wisconsin.